Hello, security pros. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on today's ESA webinar. Today's title is Utilizing New Power and Data Transmission Solutions to Protect Critical Infrastructure. And during this webinar, you'll learn more about the latest Altronix access control, networking, and fire products, and how they provide the foundation for any physical security system. My name is Ana Magallon, and I'm a marketing specialist at ESA, and I'm excited to lead this webinar today. Before we dive in, I'd like to provide some tips for those of you joining us on your first ESA webinar. Welcome. You will be muted for the duration of this session, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. If a question or comment comes to mind at any point during today's session, click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and I'll ensure we save some time for your questions with our expert today. We'll also be recording this webinar so you can rewatch the on-demand session and share it with your colleagues. Tomorrow, you'll receive an email thanking you for your attendance today with a link to the recording. We at ESA realize your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of that time with us today. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Ronnie Pennington, the Director of Sales for the Americas for Altronix Corporation. Take it away, Ronnie.
Thanks, Anna. Hello, everyone. My name is Ronnie Pennington. I'm the Sales Director for the Americas at Altronix. Today, we're going to talk about utilizing new power and data transmission solutions to protect critical infrastructure and introduce you to some of the new products that we offer out here at Altronix. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I started in the Marine Corps as an electronics technician and then worked my way up outside of the Marine Corps, installing access control and video surveillance in U.S. embassies, and then went to integrators throughout the U.S. to install in large deployments and enterprise level deployments like AstraZeneca, DuPont, and also the National Institute of Health. And from there, I took on a sales role with a manufacturer's rep firm, and I represented 23 manufacturers, where Altronix was one of the manufacturers. And I fell in love with the power side of it so much that I decided 14 years ago to come over to Altronix, and I've been here ever since. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you more to Altronix and our offerings. Altronix is the global leader in power and data transmission solutions. We have proven reliable solutions for over 40 years now. Altronix started with an AL612 40 years ago, and today is now called the AL624, which we still have thousands of those units come out of our factory in Brooklyn, New York, every month. So our factory is in Brooklyn, New York. So we do manufacture all the blue boards that you see, and all the products are manufactured in the United States. Our steel comes from the United States and is fabricated with 3 to 4 different fabricators that we utilize within Connecticut, a couple in New York and one in New Jersey. All of our products are backed by a lifetime warranty. And when I say all of our products backed by a lifetime warranty, that's for repair or replacement. Enclosures, transformers, batteries, and SFP modules are not included in that lifetime warranty, but all the board level product is. If you should have an issue with any of our products, please contact our tech support department, and then they will work on getting you an RMA for sending that back for repair or replacement. But I don't feel that you should probably have the need to do so, seeing that we have over 3,000 SKUs, over 40 years in business, and only 4 tech support guys. Without further ado, I'll go right into product. The first product I want to talk to you guys about is a new product, what we call the Tempo A2 or the Tempo A2X, Tempo A4. These are occupancy activity alert systems where we can monitor certain areas. This product was first introduced to a large chain of coffee roasters that have stores throughout the United States, Canada, and global now. And it's for single-use restrooms where we can monitor the activity within the restroom without having to peek inside, meaning that when somebody locks the door on the restroom, there's a little sensor on the strike-it plate that activates a timer. That timer then is for a preset amount of time. So let's say you have it set for 7 or 8 minutes. After 7 or 8 minutes, we can trigger another event on a contact closure, whether it's a steady or a pulsing event. So what we can do is, in this case for the coffee roaster, is that we have a light that's behind the barista's counter. If somebody locks the bathroom door, after 8 minutes, that blue light that was solid starts flashing. The barista can go knock on the door, make sure that the person's okay and everything's going well, and that person's safe. If not, then they have their procedures of what they have to go through. We've installed these also in parks, public parks where you have single-use restrooms, and keeping the homeless from locking the doors and sleeping in there at night. You can use them in universities, transportation, dining. An application actually came up today with a customer where they have in their office, they have a single shower where people can go work out and then come back and then take a shower. If someone were to slip and fall in that shower, then they wouldn't know about it. So there is a timer now that they're going to be installing on that door so that they can make sure that the person's okay, they haven't fallen in the shower, and those type of things. The next product that I want to go through is the Tempo 724Q. This is a network programmable timer. So back in the analog days, we had our PT 724A, where you would have an LCD screen and 4 buttons, and the programming for that, it was done with the installation instructions that came with the unit. If any programming had to be changed, typically what would happen is we would have the tech call tech support, and tech support would walk them through the programming steps. In this case, what we could do is we could put this timer and program it with a laptop or a local PC, and it's all drop-down menus and be able to enter information and input. It's much easier to program. And you could also keep it on the network. So if there's any change that has to happen, the technicians won't have to roll a truck. We can remotely go into it from your office and then go into the unit and change any time zones that the end user might want to change. So it's a great way of being able to use a timer for a door, let's say, if you're using it in that manner, and do any programming remotely without having to roll a truck. So it really saves you a lot of time doing it that way. The very next product that I want to talk to you about is the Pace 1 KRT and the Pace 2 KRT. What this is the Pace 1 KRT is a way of transmitting IP data and PoE over 2 wires up to 1,000 meters. The application here was for elevators. When you want to install a 2 or 3 megapixel camera, say inside of an elevator cab, the traveler cable that's inside that elevator is typically a 2-wire. There's not a coax, there's not an Ethernet, there's not a fiber. So how do we get power and data to that camera? You use that with these Pace 1 KRT adapters. The actual transceiver is the smaller version that you see on the screen now. That's actually the one that's shipping as a kit now. And then the receiver goes at the head end. And what you do is you bring PoE into this unit, and then you connect that single pair to the transceiver, and the transceiver then connects to the camera itself. And you're going to get 1,000 meters with PoE or PoE plus. On the installation instructions for this product, you will see a chart that shows the different distances that you can go depending on the amount of power that you need. This unit passes 10 megabits per second, which is more than enough that you need for 2 or 3 megapixel cameras. You could actually do a couple megapixel cameras with the Pace 2 KRT. So that receiver there will then allow you to connect 2 cameras over the 2-wire. The Pace 4 KR is a receiver that gives you 4 outputs. So I can bring 2 Ethernets from the switch, and then you have 2 single pair Ethernets going out to each camera, where you would put the Pace 1 KT transceiver and then connect your cameras to that unit there. So now we can go 1,000 meters on 4 outputs using this Pace 4 KR receiver. The next product is the Netway 3012P. In applications, it's also the Netway 3024P. In applications where, say, you're doing audio recording along with the camera, now that cameras are IP and powered via PoE, if you're putting a line level microphone next to it, you typically have to put in a separate 12-volt DC power supply and then run a 18.2 or 16.2 cable to it to power it up. And then you do your line level connection directly to the camera. In this case, what we do is we use this adapter, the Netway 3012P, where we can run PoE plus out to the camera, and then we pass that PoE and PoE plus to the camera, and then we take some of that PoE and we reduce it down to 12 volts DC so that we can power the microphone or any other device for that matter. So what we're doing here is sharing that 30 watts. So if your camera is 15 watts, let's say, as far as the current draw, you'll have 15 watts available at 12 volts DC. As long as you don't exceed that 30 watts, you're good to go. And the same goes for the 24 volts DC. So it could be a lock, it could be a microphone, it could be any other device that you may need to power both PoE and also 12 or 24 volts DC. For those of you that know Altronix as far as what we offer on the data transmission side, we offer a lot on the power side. Most people know us as a power supply company, but as video surveillance changed from analog to IP, the need for data transmission was there. So Altronix has had for many years now a series of outdoor hardened switches with 1 or 2 SFP modules. During the pandemic, we realized that not everybody did managed network switches. So we came out with a whole series of unmanaged versions. And then we also realized that not everybody's using the fiber ports. So in order to save components during a component shortage, we came out with a series of switches that had no SFP ports. So if you're doing an outdoor installation where you might have a wireless access point and a couple cameras connected, you don't need those SFP ports. So we have a smaller footprint switch here that's connected to a 12 or 24 volt DC power supply. If you're powering it with a 24 volt DC power supply, you get 120 watts of total power. That's 30 watts on each output. If you're powering it with a 12 volt DC power supply, you have a total of 60 watts on that. And you can do 30 watts on each output, but max 60 watts total of powering it with 12 volts DC. The managed version of this switch, all the switches that we have are layer 2 with VLAN capabilities. So if that's a question, we do have that capable. These units can mount to any PD8 stud pattern that we have in any enclosure, including our BR1 bracket that can mount to the side of an enclosure. So if you're doing any sort of access control where the access control panels are powered via PoE, you can use this to power the access control panels via PoE with the 24 volt power supply, but also use that same 24 volt power supply to power the locks with an ACM8 for example there. We also offer it in an outdoor enclosure with the power supply here. Here you see it with a 24 volt 10 amp power supply. And then for those cameras that draw that PoE++ or up to that 90 watt, that new 802.3 BT standard of PoE, we have a whole series of power supplies, like the PoE 360 is a 360 watt power supply, where I could use it with the NetWave 5 PQ BT that will give me 90 watts on each output. And that's for those bigger PTZ cameras with infrared illuminators and heater blowers and those type of things. So where you have the need for BT type cameras, we do have those switches available as well. And we also offer them in an outdoor enclosure. The X at the end of the part number would signify the larger enclosure that can actually fit batteries so that we can do battery backup in. But all these switches are available non-managed or managed with our link technology. Our link technology is a way of communicating via network to our boards, our switches, and our power supplies, as well as our distribution boards. And I'll go over those in a few minutes, and so that you can see everything that goes on with the link technology. The PoE 360 is the power supply that I had mentioned. It's 360 watts, 56 volts. This will power any of the outdoor switches that we have that require that higher voltage, that 48 to 56 volts DC. Of course, if you're using the regular NetWave 5P, you're going to use a 24 volt or 12 volt power supply. This PoE 360 will charge lithium iron phosphate batteries or sealed lead acid batteries. The charging circuit's a 24 volt charging circuit, so you could put 2 batteries in series to do the battery backup, and you will get, depending on the total power being consumed and the battery size that you're using, you could imagine that you're going to get about a 30 to 45 minutes of backup on this unit using this power supply. Now, we know that there's a need for larger battery backup, and I'll go over in a few minutes what we have available for that, and faster battery charging for that matter. The EBC48, and here we are. So the EBC48 is an external battery charger where I can connect, say, the PoE 360, and I can use up to 200 watts of that PoE power supply for charging batteries. So applications such as poles where power is only there available at night because the timer is in the building, where you might only have power 8 hours. If I had, say, 100 watts worth of cameras and I needed to power those for 16 hours a day, I would need 4 40 amp hour batteries in series in a box, probably mounted at the base of the pole. And then I would need this EBC48. And with that, I could have battery backup for 16 hours on 100 watts of power. So if you're drawing less power than that, then we can use smaller batteries. But I can recharge those 4 40 amp hour batteries in less than 8 hours. That's a quick turnaround for me to be able to run on battery all day and then just charge those batteries at night and then run on power that's from the pole at night for those cameras. So there's a lot of applications where this can be used in. Some have been up to that 100, 105 watts of cameras that they're drawing. And then there's others where the customer just needs 12 hours of backup no matter what. I just laid out a project yesterday where the customer needed 12 hours of backup, but it didn't require any specific amount for recharging. We were using 18 amp hour batteries, and the calculation showed that we were going to charge those 18 amp hour batteries in less than 3 hours. So that's an application that we have for that. In the future, we're looking at having an EBC 24 or 1224, where we can utilize this for our 12 and 24 volt power supplies that require lengthy backup hours and quick recharge times for critical applications. So critical infrastructure, here we are making sure that everything is up and running and secure. The NetWave 5 BTWP-X is the one that I was telling you about that allows for the 90 watts of PoE on each output. This one uses that 360 watt power supply for powering the switch. And then we have the 90 watts of backup for each one there. The NetWave SP4 TCW53, this is the largest enclosure that we offer. And here you have a shelf where you can fit 4 12 amp hour batteries on. And we use the PoE 360 power supply along with our 4-port switch. We also have this in the 8-port switch that has the 2 SFP modules. The EBC 48 that I was telling you about is mounted underneath the switch, and it comes from the factory already wired up, ready to go. The connector for the batteries is not connected, but it is there in place. All you have to do is plug it in to the batteries and then plug it into the EBC 48 that's mounted underneath the switch. These versions of the switches are link enabled for management with the VLAN capabilities. Like again, they are layer 2 switches. Here's the SP8C3W5. It's again, same as you saw before, but this is the 8-port version of the switch. In this one, I still have 360 watts available. I have 2 ports that I could have up to 60 watts, and then the rest are all 30 watt ports there. The NetWave SP4 BTWP3. So we offer these switches, these outdoor switches in a number of formats. We have 3-port, 4-port, and 8-port switches. And then we vary between 75 watt power supply, 120 watt, 240, and 360 watt power supplies. This is the latest version, is the NetWave SP4 BTWP3. We included the PoE 360 power supply in there so that you can get a full 90 watts per port. Again, charging lithium iron phosphate batteries or sealed lead acid, and it has the embedded link technology with the power management, and it's a layer 2 switch. The NetWave SP8 WPX3, same as the one that I just showed you, but it's an 8-port switch versus a 4-port switch. The NetWave SP4 BTWPN. So there's times where you don't have power at the pole at all, or maybe on the side of a building. Per se. So how do we power devices when there's no power available locally in an outdoor application? Well, we can run what they call hybrid cabling or powered fiber. And what that is you can have anywhere up to a 12 gauge 2 conductor and a multi-mode or single mode fiber run. We have a calculator on our website under application support. It's called the NetWave Spectrum Range Calculator. And basically what you can do is you can input the amount of power necessary that you need. So it's 15, 30, 60, 120 watts of power that you may need to power a device. And then you put what gauge cable that you have available to you, and it will give you a distance, what the max distance is based on whether you have PoE or PoE plus cameras. I will say when you're using the calculator, if any one of the cameras that you're connecting is a PoE plus or greater camera, make sure it's selected for PoE plus. If all of them are under PoE plus, meaning they're 15 watts or less, then you can select PoE and you'll see your distances change. And that calculation has to do with the voltage drop that is necessary to power PoE devices versus PoE plus devices. The NetWave SP4PX is the media converter that would go at the head end. So with the powered fiber, where I have the switch in the enclosure and no power supply, I need to run fiber and that copper. I have single port and I have this 4-port unit here where I can run the copper, and that there's an integrated power supply, a 480 watt power supply in this unit. That integrated power supply, I have 120 watts on each output, so I can run my 12 gauge 2 conductor to the switch and then run my multi-motor single mode fiber to the SFP port on that switch as well. So now I'm transmitting data and power I just happen to be in Georgia right now, and the first installations that were done with this Netway SP4PX were done at Truist Park, where they have cameras in the parking lots of the stadium, and they needed to run, and the switches are actually underground under a panel. And then they have 2,000-foot runs of copper and fiber back to the head end where they're powering the cameras and also transmitting all those PTZ data that's going back at 1 gig each. The Netway SP1H is the single port version of that. So single port version, what we do is we have an aux output that we could do 12 gauge 2 conductor and have 90 watts out of this unit, as well as an SFP port. And then you have your Ethernet input that's coming in from your switch. So then we have that connected with the fiber and the power going out to the remote end where your camera and your switch without the power supply is located. One thing that is I hadn't mentioned, and we're going to have in 8 weeks, I know that in many cases with PoE lighting and those type of things, that there's a requirement for 277 volt input. We do have a 277 volt version of the PoE 360 that's going to be out in 8 weeks. So if you have a need for 277 volt and mounting switches outdoor, we'll have that power supply available here in a couple of months. Solar power series, not out yet. So this is something that we're working on in-house engineering. It's part of our R&D and our future products that we will have, but we're going to have a solar series of power controllers. So they'll be designed to accept 12 or 24 volt DC solar panels. When you're dealing with solar panels, the power that comes out of a solar panel is dirty. So you could have, say, 19 to 32 volts coming out of a 12 volt DC solar panel. That power has to be regulated, and that's where the solar power controller comes in, and that's where we are developing that a solar power controller so that we can power all the other devices. So our outdoor switches, anything that's access control related, we'll be able to power those power supplies via this solar power controller. And then the outputs are either going to be 12 volts, 24 volts, or 56 volts. The 56 volts, obviously, to power the switches, but the 12 or 24 volts to power any other devices, or it could power the Netway 5P type switches if you're going to do it that way. So you could have a wireless access point with the Netway 5P unit and power everything via solar and have everything pretty much wirelessly connected. Built-in battery charger, and of course, we'll have our Link technology network management built into this unit as well. For redundancy, this product is out now. If you work on data centers, hospitals, schools, those type of environments where they might have 2 sources of power, so they'll have their primary source of power coming in from the street, and in data centers cases, they have 2 sources of power coming in from the street. Or if you're dealing with like where you have a generator, 115 volts coming from a generator as backup, and then you have your street power at 115 volts. Our power supplies only have a single 115 volt input. So with the Circ1 ATS, what we're able to do is have redundant power on the system and not have to rely on the batteries for that short time. So if like a data center is doing a switch over and they switch from the primary to the secondary, the outside green connectors are for primary and secondary, and then the center one is the one that actually would connect to the Altronix power supply. The gray connector that you see on that board, that's for monitoring the primary and secondary power. So if you did lose primary, we could send a relay closure alert, and these will also be able to connect in the future to our Link 2 products so that we can monitor them via network and remotely. But this is a redundant transfer switch is what this is. And in the future, we'll have a DC version where you might be able to connect, say, 2 10 amp 24 volt power supplies. So if something should happen to one of the power supplies, the second one backs up and it's a redundancy to the first one. So this is all about redundant power for your systems. And we have those available now, the Circ1 ATS. Then as we get in further into product, we talked about everything being 115, 230, 277. We have a newer power supply we've had out for a little over a year now. It's called the Tango 1B. The Tango 1B is a different animal. So where you may know our AL600 power supplies or our eFlow 6N type power supply, 6 amp, 12 or 24 volt power supply, this is also a similar type of power supply, but it gives you 12 and 24 volts DC simultaneously. But instead of taking 115 volts in, we can harness that 802.3 BT 90 watt PoE technology. So we bring 90 watts of PoE in. The second Ethernet cable is for powering, is for connecting data on the port. So if I have any other network device, say for an access control system or an access control panel that needs to be put on the network, I can put that in on the unit and pass that data through. But I'm stripping the power off that's coming from the injector or the switch that's 90 watts, and I'm reducing that to both 12 and 24 volts DC. And here what you're looking at is the Tango 1B mounted with the PD16 on top. We can mount an ACMS8 on top, so that we can distribute that 12 and 24 volts DC simultaneously. And there's a jumper between each fuse so that you can select 12 or 24 volts DC by output. Now, what we're doing here is we're running cables, Ethernet cable to the unit. We're not powering it with 115 volts. So then I have 12 and 24 volts out. I can also charge a lithium iron phosphate battery, and I can monitor the power input as well as the battery with the power and battery fail terminals that you see on the right-hand side. And this unit is UL 294 for access control. Where we see this unit being used a lot also is for like big box stores, warehouses, where they have a lot of alarm points and they need to put panels or expansion boards throughout the facility. Instead of having to run high power all over the place to power those units, then we can just run that Ethernet cable, power this unit here, and then provide up to 6 amps at 12 volts DC or 3 amps at 24 volts DC, depending on the cable. So Cat 5e, Cat 6 can be utilized. We recommend Cat 6a because of less heat dissipation. If you do use Cat 5e or Cat 6, you'll have about 5 amps available out at 100 meters for the 12 and 24 volts DC. So this is using the Tango. So when we talk about Tango and the amount of available power, one of the largest access control platforms to use out there is Mercury based, right? So there's 30 different manufacturers that OEM the Mercury solution. We can safely power 4 to 6 doors, and depending on what type of lock that you're doing, you can power up to 8 doors with a single Tango 1B. So what I'm doing is I'm running Ethernet to each one of my Trove enclosures, where I might have up to 8 doors in there. And off of our 4-port mid-span injector, I could power 32 doors. That's the access control boards, the readers that are connected to it, all the locks and request to exit motions that is on there. So just doing a power calculation will be able to determine whether you can power everything that you're trying to power with a single one, or if maybe we need to add a second one in there. Nonetheless, if you're looking to do power calculations on our website under application support, you'll see a Tango calculator on there, and it will allow you to input all the devices and how much power they're drawing, whether it's in milliamps or amps, and then it will determine whether you need 1 or 2 or more of the Tango 1B. The Tango 1B has an 8-pin connector on it that's stackable with our PDS8 and Link 8 ACM and ACMS8 and those type of products, so that you can stack on top those boards and plug them in. So once the PoE comes in, you get 12 and 24 volts DC out on those outputs, and then you can select by output with the jumper. The PDS16, as you see it here, comes in PTC, or now most of everything that we do is in the blade style fuses, the automotive style fuses. So if you've used our PD16W in the past, you'll notice that it's a big square board. It's different from any other board that Altronix makes. For the longest time, that's the only one that we had available. Now, with change of technology and components and being able to make things smaller, we can now fit 16 outputs on a smaller PD8 style board. So taking up less room in the enclosure, allowing for more room for growth when it comes to your access control system. So this one here is dual voltage. You can bring up to 2 power supplies. You could have one 12-volt power supply or one 24-volt power supply in there, and you can select by output. You can use this with the Tango 1B, or you could use it with our voltage regulator, like the VR6 that gives you 6 amps at 12 volts, or the VR10 that gives you 10 amps at 12 volts. By simply bringing in 24 volts from a regular power supply and stacked with the voltage regulator, I can give you both 12 and 24 volts DC simultaneously. And then the ACMS12, as these access control systems get larger, the need for more outputs on an ACM type board was necessary. So in a Trove type of enclosure where I can put different manufacturers' access control boards with our power supplies, we can do up to 24 doors. And instead of needing 3 ACM8s, I can do that with 2 ACMS12s on here. So we've reduced some of the terminals from 4 terminals down to 2, and then you use jumpers for selecting normally open, normally closed, fail safe, and fail secure on those, whether it's with jumpers or with the toggle switches on there. When it comes to Trove, we work with more manufacturers than anyone else in the industry. As you can see from this list here, it may look like 30, but Mercury alone OEMs to about 30 different manufacturers, and then HID also OEMs to about 13 different manufacturers. So from here, we have Trove enclosures with backplanes that accommodate boards from all these different manufacturers. When you go to our website on the front page, you're going to see in the middle, towards the bottom, it says Trove System Design Tool. When you click on that, this is the page that you're going to see. And we're constantly adding more manufacturers. There's still a couple missing off of this one that I know that have been added to the website. So when you click on that, you have the ability of going in and designing your own Trove system. You can drag and drop the different boards from Altronix, whether it be power supplies or distribution boards. And then you can drag and drop the different access control boards from that manufacturer into the unit, and you can build your system. We also offer Trove in 3 different ways. So we offer a la carte, where you build it yourself. You order all the parts separately, and then you build it out in the field, or you build it in your shop and then take it out to the site. The other way we offer Trove is in a pre-configured format. That pre-configured format has the Altronix power supplies and sub-assemblies already set up for either 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 24 doors. And those are built at our factory there in Brooklyn, New York. And we put the power supplies and the sub-assemblies for power distribution in there. They're wired to each other. And then all the technician has to do is drop the access control boards in, do the interconnecting wiring between Altronix and the access control manufacturers' boards, and then land all their field wiring. And then lastly, for a few manufacturers, like Mercury-based, Software House, Honeywell ProWatch, also Imron, we have the connectors where we can do wiring harnesses and do a pre-wired configuration. In this case, just like the pre-configured kit where the Altronix boards are mounted and wired to each other, we also have the wiring harnesses for power, the lock relays, the RS-45 that would go in between the boards. And then we have those wiring harnesses in place. They're labeled and they're color coded. So it's easy for the technicians to follow what's going on. And then the connectors that plug into those access control boards are put on in our factory. So when you drop the access control board into the enclosure, you just remove the connectors off of that, say, Mercury board, for example, and then for power, and then you just plug in the ones that we have, and you have power and you have your relays for your locks. So we offer that in 3 different ways. We offer the Trove: a la carte, pre-configured, and pre-wired. I encourage you to go to our website, go on the main page in the center, and start building. If you need any help learning how to use that builder, please feel free to reach out to Altronix. You can send a message to info@altronix.com, and someone will get a hold of you from our sales department, or one of our regional managers, or one of our local reps, and we can go through building these units with you. But you'll have a whole selection of kits you'll see when you go online. So the Trove 1 DR1 and Trove 2 DR2 are fairly new. These are for DIN rail mounting. So it's not just for access control, but it's anything that you might need to DIN rail mount. And there's a number of manufacturers that have DIN rail mount access control. So we have this in the Trove 1, Trove 2, and we also now offer it in the Trove 3 as well, which is our largest enclosure. That one's 36 by 30 there. We offer a DIN rail mount power supply in the DN200. This is selectable 24 volts DC at 8 amps or 56 volts at 4 amps. So if you need to power an outdoor switch, you can put it in an outdoor enclosure. It has battery charging capabilities, which is hard to find anything DIN rail mountable over an amp that is able to charge batteries. And here you have one that's selectable 24, 56 volts. And then it has the built-in battery charging. We also have a DIN rail clip, the DCL2, that will allow you to mount different adapters like the Pace 1 KRT that I showed you earlier. And in this case, this one's showing the eBridge, which is the IP over coax adapter. So if you need to mount those DIN rail, you can do so with the DCL2. The DNP1 is a plate that's DIN rail mountable. And this can mount vertically or horizontally. Right now you see it in the horizontal picture, but anything that has the PD8 hole pattern, which could be the Netway 5P, it could be a PD8, it could be that PDS16 that we showed you, you could put on that plate and mount to DIN rail. Again, it mounts vertically or horizontally. And then you can see on the screen the sub-assemblies that it accommodates: ACM4, ACM8, all the way up to the VR6 and VR10. The Trove 2 AX2 is one of the newer Trove 2s for the Axis 1610 boards. So they will accommodate with or without the covers. And then we have a kit that actually has a PoE switch the size of a PD8 that we can power all those Axis boards via PoE, and then use that same 24-volt power supply for powering the 8 locks. So what you're looking at now is a kit that we offer is the T2AXK7F8NP. It comes with everything you see there except for the Axis A1610 boards and the Ethernet cabling. So you'll see the eFlow 104MB, the ACM-S8CB with the VR6, and also see the NetWave 5P that's in that unit, and that's going to power the boards. And then the ACM-S8 powers all the locks that are connected to those boards. And if there's DIN rail, what you can't see is the A1610s are mounted on DIN rail on the back there. But we do have it for Axis now. Like I said earlier, wall mount pre-wired kits. When we talk about the pre-wired kits, we offer them a couple different ways. We offer them with the finger duct that you see there, that gray cover. I personally prefer the open one with the magnetic wire management magnets that we offer. The reason I prefer it is because the wiring's exposed. It's easier. You don't have to worry about taking the covers on and off. It's easier to work with, finding the wires and those type of things if you need to troubleshoot anything. But if you're looking for that super clean look, trying to hide any wires, the finger duct version is available. And again, we have that available for the Azure, Honeywell, HID Aero, Imron, Mercury, and Software House. So we do have pre-wired kits offered in both options. The beauty of having the pre-wired kits is that it's going to come from the factory the same way every single time. So if you subcontract work out, and you don't have to worry about the subcontractors, how they're going to initially wire the system. You still have to worry about the field wiring, but you know from the factory that it's going to be wired the same way every single time. With the Trove, we do offer custom kits, and private labeling options are available depending on quantity, usage, and those type of things. But we can get it logoed with your logo on the door there and give you your own specific part numbers if necessary. So it all depends on how you want to do it. That we have different options for that. So the pre-wired finger duct kits, we do have the option for an optional door backplane in the Trove 2 and the Trove 3. The backplanes in the enclosure are removable. So let's say that your end user is using Mercury today, but they want to switch it to Software House tomorrow. You can swap the backplanes out, probably use the Altronix power supplies and sub-assemblies that are in there, and then just get your boards from your new manufacturer of access control and mount those in the enclosure without having to pipe in wire all over again, and also like remove the enclosure off the wall, those type of things there. The enclosure on the Trove 2 is 6.5 inches deep, so you can fit backup batteries. There's ample room for that, and the Trove 3 is 7 inches deep. But if not, then we have accessories for mounting batteries. We have supplemental Trove 2 BWC and Trove 3 BWC that is going to allow you to mount those batteries in there. In the that mount above or below the enclosure. We also have the Trove 3 SWC for Trove 3 that mounts to the side. For the pre-wired magnet kits, it comes as you see it here. So we provide the power for the boards. We provide the RS-45 for the interconnect communications between the boards. We also have wiring harnesses for all the relays. And as I said earlier, they're color-coded and labeled from the factory. The Trove 3 MBK3 is a different animal. So many people asked us to come out with a larger enclosure for more boards when it comes to Mercury. They asked us to come out with a 48 by 30. We evaluated that. It doesn't fit on a standard pallet. Just in metal alone, it would cost an extra $1,000 for an empty enclosure. It wouldn't fit on a standard pallet, so shipping costs would be much higher. We would need more people in our factory to be able to handle these because they would be huge if they were 48 by 30. And then it would take 3 technicians to mount this on the wall. So 2 to hold it up and 1 to drill it in place. So what we decided to do is come out with the same Trove 3 that we've always had, where the boards lay flat and angled brackets. So we put the brackets at 135 degrees. There's slots on the side of the bracket so that you can Velcro or zip tie your wires there. They're not pulling down on the board. When it comes to this model here, we do have pre-wired kit versions, and I highly recommend that you use the pre-wired kits. You can build it from scratch, and if you are going to build it from scratch, my recommendation as a former tech, and as I actually designed this one myself, you want to start from the bottom and work your way up. That's the easiest way to work in it. But if you get the pre-wired kits, everything's already done on the left-hand side. All the pre-wiring harness is already in place. You just mount your Mercury boards. And again, start from the bottom up and then connect all your connectors on there. If you need to service any of these boards, it's easy to get to the screw to loosen the lock screw that's holding the brackets in place. And then you can just pop the board out. And then if you have to replace the board, and then pop it back in and tighten it down. So the screws are easy to get to. It's just hard to see from the photo that's in the slide here. The Trove 3 SWC, Trove 3 BWC, and the Trove 2 BWC are those cabinets that I was telling you about being able to put batteries. You can also use the Trove 2 BWC or the Trove 3 BWC as a wiring trough. So for those of you that put that gray wiring trough in before you put your enclosures to bring all your wiring in, separate it out and everything, you probably have some regular screws or security screws holding those covers in place. If I was a smart criminal, I don't need to get to your boards. I just need to get to your wiring. So what we want to do is secure that wiring that's in place. With our units, the knockouts in the bottom of the Trove 2 BWC and Trove 3 BWC match the top of the Trove enclosure, and the top knockouts match the bottom of the Trove enclosure, so that you can mount it below or above. Everything lines up. It's the same width. It's aesthetically pleasing when you're looking at it on the wall. So your customer will greatly enjoy it. Instead of having a black enclosure and gray trough, it's all uniform that way. So then with the side wiring enclosure, you'll see that there's batteries in there. Those shelves are removable. So you can either bring wiring along the side. So let's say you had a Trove 3 mounted on each side. You could bring all your wiring down the middle and then split it off like tree branches into the enclosure, and then go that way and do all your wiring and power for all your devices that are out in the field. But if you do have the shelves in place, you can fit up to 4 40-amp-hour batteries inside that unit. The latest in our rack mount version, we have a Trove 1 M1R, which allows you, it's a 2U for 24 to 36-inch racks. You could put two, let's say, Mercury boards in there with power and sub-assemblies for up to 4 doors. We also have other platforms, not just Mercury, but also we do this with Software House. We have Altronix only versions. We have Honeywell Pro Watch versions of the Trove 1 enclosures for rack mounts. But the Trove 2 M2R, here we have this for Mercury. We also have it for Identiv Hirsch type products. So if you're using those, that brand of access control, you can do that. This will give you a 2U, and you can do 8 doors with power and sub-assemblies. We also offer a rack mount battery enclosure with the RE2 that would mount above or below this. So you can fit 4 7-amp-hour batteries in. You can, when you tie them in on the back, there's a terminal block where you can make them series or parallel on all the batteries. This is the Trove 1 version. As I said, here we're showing it with the Honeywell Pro Watch. And then we have the power supply and the sub-assemblies that are in there, and we're powering all the devices and everything from the single 2U. So this one fits 24 to 36-inch racks, and then this one is more of a data center rack, which is a 40-inch deep rack, still 19 inches wide, but 40 inches deep on this one here. And then now I want to get into our link technology. You heard me mention link technology quite a few times. We offer a software platform. It's called the Link Dashboard, and you can download that from our website. If you go to the My Altronix, there's a link portal that you can sign up for. You don't have to wait for approval or anything. Once you sign up, you can download the software. The Dashboard V12 is the latest version of the software. We offer a number of products. So all of our outdoor managed switches have our Link technology, as well as other boards like our Link 2, our Link 8 PD, and our Link 8 ACM. These boards will allow you to monitor the individual outputs or the basics of the power supply, depending on how your setup is. So the Link 2 will give you the AC status, the battery status, the output voltage of the power supply, how much power is being consumed, and such. And then with the Link Dashboard, you can manage multiple sites. You can control output and reset devices like a Link 8 PD and a Link 8 ACM, and even our outdoor switches, we can reset ports or reset channels. So if you have an access control board that locks up and you want to reboot it remotely, you can do that and you don't have to roll a truck. And that typically takes care of most of the problems that are out in the field anyways, just rebooting the unit. But we can monitor the input and output voltage and current, the temperature of the inside the enclosure, the ambient temperature. It is cyber secured. We do go through third-party penetration testing. We're about to go through it again. And we do that every couple of years, and just making sure that everything's secure and on the up and up when it comes to cybersecurity. So again, that link dashboard is available for download. There's no licensing. There's no fee associated with monitoring. You can put as many of the link devices or Netway Spectrum managed units that you want on here, and there's no licensing fees or anything that for managing. It has an event log that tracks history. It provides that system diagnostics. We can send alerts via our dashboard, so you can see it on the screen here if you're monitoring it, or we can send those alerts via email. So we can monitor current, voltage, temperature, battery, all that stuff. And then lastly, what I want to talk about is our combat for, we have a whole series of NAC power extenders for fire, but BDAS, bidirectional amplifier systems for communications. Unfortunately, today is 9/11, and what we went through, and the reason we lost a lot of first responders is because they couldn't communicate to each other within the high-rise buildings and at the World Trade Center. And now with what was instilled is these BDAS, bidirectional amplifier systems for first responders, so that they can communicate via the outside, inside the building, and within the building. And there's repeaters that go throughout the building. And these are being mandated by a lot of municipalities now in these high-rise buildings. And what Combat does, it's a power and backup system for these amplifiers. So we would have the Combat, as you see it here, with up to 55 amp hour batteries, and we're working on a 110 amp hour version of that for the battery backup. And it has to meet UL 2524, which is a new UL standard for these units. And typically what you hear is BDAS, but it's also ARCs or ERCs type systems is what other names for it, depending on your region of where you are. But we provide the AC fail battery, and there's trouble supervision. And along with the Combat, there's an annunciator panel that has to be connected that will give you all the troubleshooting. And this is remotely on various floors throughout, so that they can inspect and make sure that they still have their communications up, that the system's running correctly, that the amplifier is connected, and you have bicolor LEDs that indicate what condition the system is in. So this allows for local and remote annunciation of various trouble conditions of the Combat and the bidirectional amplifier system. Now, if you need to get a hold of any of us, you could always email info@altronix.com or call 718-567-8181, which is our global headquarters there in Brooklyn, New York, where we manufacture, engineer, and design everything. The names that you see on the screen here, you see myself up top as Director of Sales. We also have a regional out in the West Coast that's more localized, and then also in the Northeast. And then both of those guys both cover Eastern and Western Canada as well. And I cover Latin America by myself with our rep firms. And then we have a whole series of rep firms that you can find on our website. And if you want to get a hold of us and you need somebody local to come out to you, we can get somebody out there locally to you with through our local rep network. I want to thank you for your support, and I'd like to open up for any questions.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. Let me take a look at the questions here. The first one I see is, do you add a UL label for the factory pre-wired Trove enclosures as a system, or just rely on the UL labels of each of the modules?
So the Trove itself enclosure is UL listed with our power supplies and sub-assemblies, and also UL listed, say, with like Linnell boards as a system. But the UL labels do come on the Trove enclosures as themselves, because they are UL listed enclosures with our power supplies and sub-assemblies.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's see, another question here. Are there other options besides single pair Ethernet adapters to extend networks and PoE beyond the 100 meter limitations?
Yes. So we talked about the Pace 1 KRT being able to do that over 2-wire. We also have the Pace, where we can do use standard Cat 5e or Cat 6, and we can go 500 meters, 100 megabits per second. We also have, of course, fiber transceiver modules. You could take the data very far. But if you're talking about doing that with PoE, we have the PACE series of products for doing it with Ethernet, like the PACE 1 STR. We also have multi-port receivers, 4, 8, and 16 channel for those applications. And we also have, if you're doing IP over coax, we can do IP and power over coax as long as it's 95% copper. We could do that with our eBridge series of products. And again, we have one-to-one transmitter receivers on those. And then we have multi-port receivers in the 4, 8, and 16 channel. And with those, we can go 300 meters with our 100 megabits per second series. And with our 25 megabits per second series, we can go 500 meters with the data and the power.
Thank you so much. With the Tango 1B, do I need an electrical contractor to run conduit?
No, that's a really good question. So we're running, you still need electrical for your mid-span injector or your switch that's going to provide the 90 watts. So typically that's going in a rack, and you might have a plug-in where you can plug with an IEC connector, you can plug that switch or the injector in at the rack. But as far as running the cable to the Tango 1B power supply, it's just a standard Ethernet cable. So it's Cat5e, Cat6, or Cat6a, and those can take the same paths as as your regular network trays. So if you have a large building and you have network cables running all along the building, this can take the same normal paths. And I don't need an electrician to run conduit for that. And I don't need an electrician to terminate inside of my power supply either, because now I have an RJ45 on the end of that, and I just plug that in right into the Tango. As soon as you unplug it, there's no power at the end of that cable because the handshake is gone. Once the handshake's provided again, then power comes back up. So it's a very safe to use power. And in the fact that it can run through the same cable trays and I don't need conduit, it saves you a lot of time and labor. And it's not completely eliminating an electrician because you still need power at the head end to power the injectors and the switches, but I don't need to run conduit and power to my power supply and have to have that added cost there. So very good question.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that. And it looks like our last question. Is there a recurring cost or licensing fee for the remote management software?
No, there is not. So once you download it from our website, you can put it on your server locally at the site, or if you want to monitor from your office multiple customers, you can do that, and you can put as many devices on it as you want, and there's no licensing fee for that software.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ronnie. I think that's all of the questions for today. So thank you all so much for joining us for this webinar. Thank you for your time, and we will see you all next time.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Anna.